many of you are here at Harvard, and you're thinking like, oh, food security would never be an issue at Harvard. But in fact, it's a core value for us, and I'll tell you why it's a core value for us. It's a core value because Harvard has created an education in which students come to this university regardless of their financial need. They come here because of their capability. And the reality is that many of them get here and it's the first time in their lives they might be food secure. So it's an issue that's close to us because these are the people that we're serving and they're the thinkers for the future. That's really important to us. It's also really important to us because of the community in which we live. Many of you got to hear from Melissa Honeywood yesterday, who talked about the fact that 40% of her students are on the free or reduced lunch program, and we feel a real commitment to our neighbors here. So we developed a philosophy about giving back and a practice about giving back, and we want to share that with you real briefly as a setup for this conversation.
Hunger is a huge problem in the greater Boston area. There are estimates and studies that indicate that about 1 in 10 people are food insecure in the area, and then of course in different populations that number can be quite a bit higher. There are hungry people all over, so it's a huge problem, and we're trying to do a little bit to help it with this program.
We have 14 different dining facilities, and our students are on a mandatory meal plan. We have to be prepared to feed the numbers that come in. In this business, we're bound to have food left over, so we're just looking for a good way to be able to take that food and put it to good use.
Food for Free is a food rescue and hunger relief organization. We bridge the gap between waste and want. On one side of the equation, there's a lot of extra food out there, and on the other side, there's a lot of hungry people, and we help connect the two. 2 nights a week, a team of student volunteers, they're taking the leftover food from service for the day and plating it up into meals. They use a serving of grains, a serving of protein, and a serving of vegetables, seal them up, label them, put them in their freezer, and then our trucks come and pick them up a couple times a week, and we get them out to the families that need them.
So Harvard students come in a group with a bunch of other students, and I think from their perspective, it's a great way for them to interact with the D-Hall staff and then also sort of talk to each other and interact while they're sort of creating this food. So it's a way for students to get to know their local D-Hall staff. It's a way for students to create tangible results, and it's also a way for students to reach out to the local community in like a very convenient way. I think most students have really enjoyed the experience that they've had with the Family Meals program. There's a lot of people coming away smiling and sort of happily taking a picture. So I think a lot of people get a lot out of it, and I've had a lot of people ask if they can come again.
So I'm really pleased to say that we donate 30,000 pounds of food a year to Food for Free. But in the spirit of this conversation of small change, big impact, we took what we learned in that, developing that program with them, and then we wrote it down. We identified all the problems along the way, and we built a case study so that we can share it with our colleagues at other college dining programs and magnify that. So I just want to use that sort of spirit of innovation and this incredible panel of innovation. So what we really have here is a group of folks who represent very different pieces along the chain of trying to solve the issue of wasted food. So again, not food waste, but wasted food. And all these folks who have very creative approaches to it. So I'm going to ask you, just for the sake of the audience, to give us your 30-second elevator pitch about what you and your organization do. And we'll start with Sasha.
Hi, I'm Sasha Purpura, and I'm the director of Food for Free. We're either the first or one of the very first food rescue organizations in the nation, founded in 1981. And at the core, that's what we do is food rescue, about 2 million pounds a year. The bulk of that is grocery, but as Crista's video just showed, in 2014, we launched a partnership with Harvard, moving into prepared food rescue, and that's expanded to many other universities and hospitals, corporations, where we take frozen surplus food. When they're not plating it up for us, we break it down frozen and plate those meals up frozen, and we're providing those to community college students, to homeless families in hotels, anyone who doesn't have access to cook the groceries. And then in addition to that, we offer a lot of school-based programs, backpack programs, school markets, and the family meals program into colleges and state and community colleges.
Great, thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Ricky Ashenfelter, CEO of Spoiler Alert. We're a Boston-based software company that helps food businesses manage unsold inventory. We work with operators of distribution and fulfillment centers, companies like Cisco and HelloFresh, and other big names across the food manufacturing, distribution, and e-commerce verticals. We do that by providing a business intelligence solution that helps them identify sources of shrink and excess in their operations, a private marketplace platform for them to administer secondary market and discount and donation programs, as well as outlet sourcing services to help them tap into local, regional, and national networks of donation and discount channels.
Hi, my name is Mandelbaum. Rock and Wrap It Up is an international think tank, and we develop algorithms and asset recovery models that we introduce to agencies that fight poverty. We started 28 years ago. Our first partner actually was here in Boston, the band Aerosmith. All their food from backstage went to feed the hungry on their tours. We now have over 160 bands that have joined us. Our sport partners, we have 80 franchises, arenas and stadiums, and here we have Charlie Jacobs, who owns the Boston Bruins, and the Bruins have been giving us food, as has the entire NHL for the last 11 years. The key is that we convert pounds of food into greenhouse gas diversion numbers, so that the quid pro quo to our donors is that we give them the statistics, what they've donated, and they get back to market the greenhouse gas work that we do. I want to recognize also Region 1 of the EPA. Thank you for coming. The EPA has been very involved with the Food Recovery Challenge nationally, and Rock and Wrap It Up has been recommending partners throughout the United States.
Great.
Ismail, Director of Operations at CommonWealth Kitchen. We are Boston's, we are an incubator, nonprofit incubator in Dorchester, Massachusetts, where we work with individuals, people of color, women, immigrants who suffer from systemic oppression when it comes to either wealth, in this case wealth, and just kind of social injustice. And what we do is we work with our entrepreneurs, of which we've got 50 graduates that actually have an annual revenue of about $20 million. So we are working to stream that revenue, to actually turn that impact, that economic impact, into social entrepreneurs. And so what we actually have begun to do is work in this space around food capturing the value of food in the region, in the local farms, and turning that into opportunity for our entrepreneurs and to our local farms, and putting that into the larger food accounts at Partners Healthcare, Harvard University, Sodexo, and our market accounts, by creating value for our farm partners.
Good morning. My name is Jasmine, Crowe, founder and CEO of Goodr. We leverage blockchain technology to combat hunger and food waste. We started in 2017, and we have built an app as well as a dashboard, and we concentrate on real-time food rescue. We believe that there's no predictability in when you will have food excess or food waste, and so we have built an app that kind of works in reverse like an Uber Eats, and we leverage a network of third-party logistics partners, which can include everybody from DoorDash to Roadie to Uber Eats drivers. So we're already using vehicles that are on the road and actually keeping that food right in the backyard. So we're leveraging massive technology, but also the shared economy. And we look at what we're doing is also reducing our carbon footprint, because we don't want to be putting a lot of trucks on the road and a lot of vehicles on the road when we already have vehicles on the road that are there and can be used for other use cases. So that's what we do.
Fantastic. So you all have a remarkable bird's eye view of what's happening in the food system. And I think about wasted food, and it's happening along every step of the chain. What has been the most surprising element of waste that you've discovered in your experience?
Well, how much waste there is. We have found that in the for-profit model, it's anywhere from 5 to 10% that is made overage. Most of it is to try to capture more revenue, whether it be in sports or in the entertainment industry. And I would call it low-hanging fruit, so to speak, but the reality is that it could be catering halls, it could be schools, it was mentioned hospitals. All of them are working with 5 to 8% overage.
That actually leads to what has surprised me, which is the partnerships that this issue has spawned. So not only the partnership between Food for Free and Harvard, with the school systems that we work with, it as unfortunate as it is something that has really mobilized folks across sector to come together in ways that Food for Free, having been around almost 40 years now, hasn't seen opportunities for these type of partnerships or the engagement level from the partners that we're working with today. So that's a positive surprise on our part.
I think one area we spend a lot of time looking at is higher up the supply chain and the impacts of e-commerce and what that's having on potential waste generation. When you think about it, the advent of grocery delivery and meal kits are helping cut down on consumer waste in the household because it's pre-portioned on demand. But what it's doing is shifting the burden higher up the supply chain. And unlike traditional brick and mortar retailers that can take fresh chicken, fresh fish, and freeze it and sell it as such in a grocery store, take produce that's starting to not look as great and turn it into hot bar items. Warehouse operators and especially big grocery delivery companies don't have that same flexibility. So I think we as consumers should be cognizant of the growth of this sector and what reverberations that can have in waste generation and other parts of the supply chain.
For me, for in our organization, as we start to look at, talk directly to our farms and we look at the data, we say, wow, you've got all those peaches, let's gather it and let's process it. To actually process peaches are specialized to grow a certain size and fit certain specialized machines, which cost a lot of money. So for us to be able to react and capture and turn it into usable food is very expensive. So we have to be very strategic about what products we can actually capture regionally. So that is a surprise for us. So we keep going now, we're going to do this next. Then we have to go to our funder and say, hey, can we get this specialized peach machine that can actually core peaches? And it's $300,000. And so the answer is no. So it's that really trying to understand like how we can actually handle this food. And you get to realize how it is waste in the first place, because if it doesn't fit in that specialized machine, it gets tossed aside. And so a hairy peach that has a pit in the middle is not usable when you talk to scale it up. So that is where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with Sid in that I'm surprised about how much food waste there is, but also about the amount of education that's still required to turn a lot of people onto the fact that they can donate this food, that there are laws and there are incentives that are encouraging them to do so. A lot of people still live on the old guard that, oh, we can't donate the food because of liability, we're going to get sued. And they, for all intents and purposes, are still throwing that food out. We have millions of people in this country that are still going hungry. And so it's just surprising to me that in a country where we're allowing people that we've never met before to pick us up at our houses and take us home, we are still so afraid to fight hunger.
That's a good, yeah.
Yeah, just let me add to that. Most people don't know the existence of the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act of 1996, which protects donors from liability. Rock and Wrap It Up wrote the Federal Food Donation Act of 2008, and we are now asking all states, and I would love to see Massachusetts put into play the State Food Donation Act, which was passed in Tennessee, which basically directs all state agencies, whether they be the state colleges, the prisons, the hospitals, as was mentioned by Jazz, the low-hanging fruit in each state could feed anyone who hungers in this country. But if it were directed by the state on the state level, that they can pass these laws, that any food under their bailiwick really should be going to the people.
So you all are kind of jumping gratefully into the next sort of, what are the major changes that we can make to reduce waste? You're talking about policy, you're talking about equipment, you're talking about finding a way to close the gap between the risk that you all are taking and the reward or the resources that might join you, the partnerships that you need. Expound a little bit more on all those things.
Sure. I think one thing we think about a lot is there's been a lot of discussion around the link between wasted food and hunger. This panel represents that, and everyone here is super passionate about that. But there's, I think, an opportunity to make safer spaces to have dialogue and conversation around the intersection of food waste and other parts of value creation, opening it up to talk about food deserts, food access to nutrition. And I think Ismail and Doug, who wasn't here from Daily Table, are great models of that, which is affordability and the millions of Americans who are buying food that aren't necessarily hungry, but aren't getting the right type of nutrition. And I think there needs to be safer places to have that type of dialogue. I think we should be applauding organizations like Dollar General, that is a staple in rural America, who's now starting to bring produce into their stores. Grocery Outlet is one of the biggest grocery discount retailers in America that most of us have never heard of. They filed for IPO last week. These are big organizations. There's actually been quite a bit of victimization of the ugly produce companies most recently, and whether you're for or against that debate, I think at the root of it is some conflict between the environment, social justice, and capitalism. And I think recognizing there's a lot of different angles to this, there's a lot of healthy dialogue that can be had, and we as organizations, for-profit and nonprofit, should be invited to have those without judgment.
And that touches on what I wanted to say in terms of capitalism versus environment. One of the things you said at the beginning, Crista, about the value system at Harvard, Harvard has its goals of educating and of building its endowment and money in order to support what you guys are doing, but Harvard Dining Services also has a budget and has its core drivers. However, they have a value system that says this is part of our problem, and we've been able to implement this partnership at minimal, negligible cost to Harvard Dining Services, and in fact, to great benefit in terms of engaging students. We work with all of the Harvard dining halls picking up food, and the feedback we've gotten from Harvard dining staff that work the dining halls, their morale at work, instead of having to throw this food away, being able to give it back to the community. And many of them have known or themselves at some point have struggled with food insecurity themselves. So I think part of it is a mind shift of not siloing priorities. I mean, people can achieve profit and in fact can find ways to solve this problem that benefits their bottom line. One other change that really needs to happen is date labeling. Harvard Law School put together a great paper on that. Date labeling is arbitrary and leads to tremendous amounts of food waste. So that alone, I mean, there's simple policy like that could affect tremendous amounts of food waste at the consumer level.
Yeah, I mean, as I think about it, is if I go to a farmer, like if I have a relationship with someone and I say, hey, look, I can actually move 500 more pounds of product into a partner's account, partner sell their account, you're going to have to only get 2% margin, where the GPO, the group purchasing option, is going to then rebate on the other side, and then distributor's going to take 25% of the margin. So if it doesn't work for all parties in this value chain, the conversation needs to shift a little bit to a more shared economy. And I don't know how we do that with the demand coming from just the top, and we've got the innovation coming from the bottom. We do have to meet in the middle a little bit, like lightning, kind of go at the same time. And I don't know how to make that work, but I do know that sometimes farmers are saying, that's great, but $200,000 is only going to give me $8,000. And so where's the value proposition for the farmer? It's not really great. So we got to have some further conversation of how we make it fair and equitable along the value chain.
Yeah, I would just add that there could be greater policy around food safety and food donations, and it varies by state. I mean, and really by county and city. We spend a tremendous amount of time doing R&D on food safety laws per every city and every county that we would launch in. And one of the things that's always been very peculiar to me is the display foods. So this is, you know, if you all intensive buffets, kind of events where food has been displayed, and they're saying like, you know, we have to throw that away. And as soon as it's out, we've got to throw it away every 4 hours, and I've talked to Whole Foods about this. I've talked to a lot of people, and I've said, well, if I as a consumer can purchase that food at 3 hours and 50 minutes, you know, what makes it just now have to be thrown away at 4 hours? Or can we create some kind of policy that if at 3 hours and 30 minutes, can we now get that food removed? Can we get it either blast frozen or whatever to have to be able to save it? But if it's good enough for me to pay for it, I just don't understand why 1 minute later it now has to be thrown away. And I think that that's something that we really need to think about on why we're saying buffet foods and things that have been out in the public consumption can now not be donated if it was okay for us to buy it.
On the macro level, though, the U.S. government, specifically the USDA, has very stringent guidelines right now, and 1/3 of all food is not purchased because of the USDA guidelines, and they call it the ugly food. The reality is that if the USDA, FDA, and all of the other lettered organizations could change their policies, then so much more food would not be left on the wayside. And the last two administrations, we worked closely with the Climate Data Initiative that President Obama had. And we asked specifically for the USDA to address this. They would not. The Trump administration now has put together an articulation of the USDA, the FDA, and the EPA together to address food waste. And it's the first time that those three organizations have been put together. But again, if they don't change the purchasing from the farmers, then we are leaving so much in the field.
Talk a little bit more, just for the support of some of the folks in the room. Talk about some of those rules.
Well, the key is that they look at first size, shape, color, and if it does not fit within less than a standard deviation of what they have administered, the farmers can't sell it. We were told it's 1/3, it could be more than that, but 1/3 of everything that's grown, which means that all of the water, the fertilizer, the person power, the transfer of transportation of these items, it's all wasted. 1/3 of all of these resources are wasted because of government regulations, and they have to be made a little bit more eased.
So I don't think USDA is who you should point the finger at for ugly produce. I think it's consumers.
No.
If consumers will buy ugly produce and see it for what it is, suppliers will start carrying it, retailers will start putting it on their shelves. I think that's at the root of produce recovery and empowering farmers to get more product into market. I think USDA can be an enabler of that, as can EPA. But ultimately, getting to consumers, I think, is the best driver for that. And Save the Food and the NRDC has started a number of campaigns on this front. And I think any type of education for what's inside the food, not on the outside, can go a long way.
Fantastic. So when you talked about the rules about food, one of my big surprises in food waste, one of my the things that most shocked me was that notion that if the lettuce gets a little too tall, it stays in the field. It doesn't make the bag. So that kind of leaves me to how does packaging contribute to or solve some of our waste challenges? We're processing more food than ever. Rather than leaving it in its natural state, we're processing it. So that's the reality in which we live. So go ahead, Jasmine.
I mean, I'll speak from the downstream side. It's really helped with Goodr. As part of our service, we provide packaging materials to all of our customers. And so it's been a twofold win. One, because we have agreements in place with all the nonprofits that we work with, and we're using this chain of custody to see where the food is at all points. It also allows our nonprofit partners to never really be able to point back to which organizations they get the food from, because everything arrives in Goodr packaging. I also believe that that's really helped our customers be able to act a lot faster with not having to worry about, well, what am I going to put the food in? Do I have the supplies? We make sure that they have them at all times ready. We have everything labeled so they can actually check off any allergens that there are. We're able to scan things to different locations. We're also able to track temperature in transit. So having the right kind of packaging and those materials has really helped us, and I think has helped our customers just be able to actually divert this waste.
Fantastic.
On the flip side, and you sort of referenced it, packaging dictates produce sizes, and that's a lot of why some of that can't be harvested or sold, because it doesn't fit into the packaging. Also, from a processed food standpoint, as soon as you are packaging, you're putting a date label on something that typically is arbitrary and has nothing to do with food safety, so it does promote a lot of food waste. I think there's definitely benefits. I forget who was mentioning the individual meals. You were Ricky. Of course, that generates food waste on the back end, but on the front end, it's enabling people to package up food in the exact portions that they want. The flip side of that is packaging does dictate how much food you're taking home, and some stores may offer loose potatoes. I know I can never buy potatoes because it's a huge bag of potatoes. They last for a while, it's true, but it takes me a long time to eat a bag of potatoes. So packaging, if people will purchase, in many cases, more than they can eat before that food, in truth, does get beyond its point of being edible.
Right, and go ahead. No, so to just I guess to illustrate that a little bit more, if you shop at a warehouse store like a BJ's or a Costco, those apples that come in that package have a date, and if they don't move all those pallets of apples, those go to waste because they have a date on them. So that is the impact of packaging and putting a date on it. It's a lot.
We've actually looked at the models that are now being done in Germany, France, and Great Britain, where along with the packaging is the dating, and they have right now put into play, and we'd love to see it in this country. It's not happening quickly enough. The supermarket, the chains, these wholesalers are fined if food goes into landfill. And it's all through software. And the ability of having software run these supermarkets can only help all of our organizations, because the fines are huge that they're putting on the supermarkets. And they have had huge compliance. So in Great Britain, Germany, I think Italy's looking at it also. I know France, this has gone on now. It's the third or fourth year that they've had these fines on supermarkets that are not giving the short-dated items to the hungry.
Fascinating. So I guess that makes me want to ask, is the problem insurmountable? Is the problem of wasted food insurmountable? If it is, why? But if it's not, why?
I think it is and it isn't. I mean, I do think there's an underlying cultural issue, particularly in this country. We expect to be able to buy whatever we want when we want it, and we also expect bounty. My husband's a farmer, and we used to sell at the farmer's market, and his motto was stack it high and watch it fly. So we'd pile up all these carrots, and just 100 bunches of carrots make this beautiful, bountiful pile. And in the first 2 hours, we would sell 95 bunches of carrots. And then in the next 6 hours, maybe we'd sell 2 more bunches. But people, they don't see a lot of carrots. They don't want to buy the carrots. And if you apply this now to a supermarket that wants to stay in business, so they have to make sure they have a lot of everything. And they have to have everything, because if I go into a Whole Foods in January and I want a tomato, there better be a big pile of tomatoes. And to me, it's a cultural thing that, is it insurmountable? It's really hard to change culture. So I do think on the negative side, that's one of the significant challenges. The consumers drive this. You talked about it, Ricky. If they'll buy ugly produce, we'll sell ugly produce. On the flip side, surplus food is a resource, and there's more and more attention being paid to this, hence this conference. And there's more and more players getting involved, creating new ways to deal with this that are positive and a gain for all sides, whether it's the family meals and engaging staff and students and getting food to folks who need it, or some of the other solutions that are taking place up here. There is an amazing amount of innovation happening around surplus food that gives me a lot of hope.
Insurmountable, I'm going to say depends on at what scale. I think large, big food, absolutely, is insurmountable. I think, so I founded, I co-own a restaurant in Putney, Vermont that works directly with farms, small farms. We've been open for 6 years, and we helped solve that exact same problem for farmers who are stacking up carrots. It is, hey, look, bring it to our restaurant. We'll turn it into, we'll take it no matter how much you give it, and we will then turn it into a palatable thing for our customers. And our small scale farmers are seeing increases in their revenue, and $5,000 a year to a small farmer. That's very impactful, and it's like, yes. So small scale, I don't think it's insurmountable. Large scale, I think it's like closing your eyes and writing the national anthem with your non-dominant hand. It's not insurmountable, but like ridiculously hard. And so I think that's where it is.
Great analogy.
Wow, right? Very, very easy to picture.
The partnerships that we have, especially with the for-profit sector, it is insurmountable because of greed, and they're always going to make the second 2 or 3 hot dogs on the grill at the ballpark to sell by the 7th, 8th inning. And because the price of that food is so small, they're willing to sacrifice that. So on that level, I know that there will never be a time that we will not pick up food prepared but not served at arenas and stadiums.
But if you're getting that to people, it's not wasted food.
No.
Right.
Well, so what is the, this is a curveball, I'm setting you all up, sorry. What is so this is all about, this program is really about making those kinds of connections or thinking about partnerships. So what is the partnership that you need to take the solution that each of you has to make it a bigger impact, right? If you think about your scale today, from Sid to Sasha at very different scales, what's the partnership that you need today that takes you to the next tier on this?
We need to reach out to the youth. When we have our Whole Earth Calculator, which is a mobile app that converts pounds of food into greenhouse gas, that has to be put into lesson plans from grades 4, 5, 6, 7 through high school, so that students are learning at a young age first, if there's food left over in their schools, let's feed the hungry with it. If they're a science teacher, let's say that everything has some carbon value. If you get to the next generation on that level, then we believe that, number one, everyone's going to eat, but more importantly, people will become less and less wasteful because it'll translate to not just what they do in school, but you're going to have a 10-year-old go at home and say, hey, Ma, you made too much. You made me eat all this stuff, but it's too much. And it has to be endemic. It has to come from a level that the family is involved, because that's when you have facilitated change. And we would love to see everybody fed, but more importantly, we would like to see less resources used to make food that's not sold. And if we're talking about, protecting our planet, and I love what Jim said earlier, because we absolutely believe in people, planet, profit. That is what every company wants to have the next generation believe in. But the only way of doing that is to have that done from the bottom up and the top down, So on that level, it comes down to getting into the schools with what all of us are doing. And that's what our philosophy is.
Man, so for me, I think our organization already has the partnerships. When I was at Daily Table, we had the partnerships. I just think those partnerships need, and these two organizations are two nonprofits who are thinking socially. So if you're thinking socially, you're holding people as I guess.
Equal?
Well, no, not even equal. I'm trying to think like it's instrumental versus like sacred. It's like people are sacred, environment is sacred, and capital is instrumental. And the big and where it seems like in our partnerships, capital is sacred and people and environment is instrumental. And I think that is the partnership shift that needs to change a little bit, of trying to meeting in the middle about like not just giving us intellectual contagions to like go out and say, oh yes, we're actually fixing stuff here, but actually fix stuff together with the partnerships that we have. That's really what it is. I think we're building the partnerships. We just need to strengthen them and like actually hold each other accountable and have very difficult conversations. Let me call you out. Let me say, hey, look, you're doing it wrong. Let you say, you're annoying me. I think that's okay. I think that's really what we need. The partnerships are there, like the connections are there, the money's there, the energy's there. We just gotta tighten up.
So going back to the video you showed where Harvard's taking our packaging and students are making up meals, I feel like we could scale exponentially if we took that model into every corporation and every university and hospital and school. It wouldn't be a lot of food from a lot of these places, but it would offer tremendous benefits, additional benefits, which goes to what you were saying, Sid. This is going to come from, to some extent, the younger generation. A lot of companies now struggle with how do we attract employees, and a lot of what employees want are to feel like they're giving back at work, that their job and community are integrated. And I see this opportunity with creating meals on site as an excellent tool now, and something that corporations may start to value and want, looking for ways to do things on site, in-house, that help the environment, give back to the community, and engage their employees. So that's many one-on-one partnerships that I feel hopeful, and Food for Free could do it here and others could do it elsewhere. It's something that doesn't require anything sort of but the will and a package.
Jasmine?
I think one topic we haven't talked about is the role that waste haulers can play or aren't playing. I think everybody talks about how food waste reduction is a win-win-win for everyone. Everyone wins. We all win. There's really only one loser, which is the operators of landfills and the people that are making money on hauling food to landfills. And there's a role for them to diversify their business models, to create incentives that they can generate revenue stream. I don't know the solution yet. EPA is in the room. There's carrot and stick models that make either landfill operation more expensive, that companies truly have only their bottom line in mind when they're engaging with organizations like us. But right now, most of America, it's pretty cheap to put food in the landfill. And we don't have a lot of support by those landfill operators to be part of this dialogue.
Yeah, I mean, I was literally about to say the exact same thing. It is when you're paying $29 a ton, and I come in and I'm maybe charging $40 a pickup. It's a big difference there. I will say that in Los Angeles County, they are pretty much the first city that we've been working on their food policy council, where they are requiring the waste haulers to have a food diversion partner. And then, of course, it's with government, though. So now there's like a 5-year wait list to actually put in a bid to be a food diversion partner. So it technically won't start for 4 more years. But I think that is a really big start and opportunity. I would also say, more partnerships amongst organizations that are doing this. I see often that there's a lot of competition and people that are trying to for all intensive purposes, in hunger and in food waste. And that cannot be. A lot of, I won't say the national big organization, but I was at an event at a trade show, and they walked up to me and they would say, yeah, I've been researching you. You guys are a competition. And I said, I didn't think that we were in competition to end hunger. I think we should be partners in this, and we should be all working towards one common goal. And this is a massive organization that receives billions of dollars in funding, but they're looking at little me, who receives nothing in funding, who has received very little in funding. And as a Black woman, it was very hard for me to even raise the $1 million that I did raise. And so for a national organization to come to me and say, you're my competitor, I've been researching what you guys are doing, that is a problem. We are not going to solve problems looking at each other as competition until we start looking at each other as collaboration. I can help nonprofits. I inventory and have data and analytics on every single thing that it is that we recover. Most nonprofit organizations don't do that. So I could tell the airport how many salads, of which kind of salads, how many sandwiches, how many fruit cups, literally down to the exact item, how much we've recovered. I can give them their true tax value because we blockchain and understand that. And then I have transparency in who that food goes to actually at its final user. And so when I hear people that are looking at us as competition instead of innovation and opportunities for us to kind of collaborate, that's a really big problem for me. And I think we're all up here doing different things. Many people can look at us as competitors, but I look at us as collaborators and, really partners in the fight. But too often we are seeing it the other way, and I think that that's a problem.
That to me is too perfect a statement. I do want to allow just a few minutes for questions. I think we have time for 2 or 3 questions, and I've got a mic. I'll take this mic for anybody who wants to ask a question.
So I, for the last about 10 years, have worked more or less adjacently to the cruise line industry. And what I find obviously really fascinating about this is there is typically a tremendous amount of food waste that is occurring on these ships. And there are lots of roadblocks that are in the way for a lot of this. Number one is because usually these ships are leaving and they're going into international waters. And as soon as they come back, even though the food was loaded in the U.S. and it never leaves the ship for the most part, as it comes back, it has left the country. So it's just like when you fly in with an airline and you can't bring in your apple, for example. So my question is, and then also there's the food safety issue that goes along with that. So the cruise line is sort of self-monitored, but also not by the CDC, by USPH, and they're extremely, extremely stringent about their food safety. So when you were talking about 3.5 hours and now at 4 we're throwing it out, who is advocating for policy change? Who are the scientists that are sort of that are going to be looking towards making a change in that industry so that we can address some of these food waste issues? Something as simple as it came here from the U.S. and then it just went on a ship and now it's back, but now we can't even land it as compost is challenging to understand. So who's addressing that?
I mean, we met with Carnival when we were in Miami, and it was very much, we can't touch it, we can't do anything about it. I like to think that I'm definitely advocating for policy changes, but I'm just one voice, and so I know I won't be able to get it done on my own. I was very shocked that the food wasn't even being turned into like biodiesel fuels. There are so many other use cases for food waste, and so even at Goodr, we've helped expand on that model, but also we're making it a more circular approach. So even to the nonprofits that we're getting food to, we're making sure that they're composting, that we're getting food and animal feed, so we can really tell our customers, in fact, your food did not end up in landfill. Because if you just take it from your, this grocery store and give it to this nonprofit, if the food still ends up in landfill, the grocery store can't really claim that they are not producing waste, because they are. So I've talked to Carnival. I met with the Miami Heat. They're the owner, and it just was these are the rules. We can't touch them. This is the old guard. Yeah, the airlines, like you said, the same thing. All the food gets, burned when coming from these international. I think there's opportunities though in their cruise kitchens, and that's what I'm trying to talk to them about now. So there's all that food is still prepared in one location, and they're throwing bananas out if they have a brown spot on them. So there's a lot of things that are taking place in the cruise kitchen before it even gets to the ship that's also being wasted. So I think it's about like baby steps. So we're gonna try and go after their cruise kitchens where all that food is prepared, and then start trying to figure out what it takes to get to their ships. But they waste a ton of food.
We have an advocacy program that we started many years ago, but the recent one right now is trying to pass in every state the State Food Donation Act. It passed in the state of Tennessee. It recently parts would pass in New York with the new Crowe budget last week. But it's basically saying that any food under the bailiwick of our state cannot be thrown away. And that State Food Donation Act, we'd love to see it pass here in Massachusetts because of all of the state colleges, the state prisons, state hospitals, and many other places that the state owns that food, which means that the people of the state deserve to be fed if they're hungry. So any help that we could have, anyone want to see us afterwards, we would love help in passing this in every state in this country.
So I'll ask a last question. What should people know about the folks who benefit from your efforts that you think they don't already know? What should people know about who benefits from your work?
The second part threw me because you may already know this. There's two things. I mean, one is hunger in this country so often goes hand in hand with obesity and diet-related disease. So the kind of food matters incredibly. You can't, food waste, lots of things are wasted that we just won't accept because we're trying to deal with a bigger issue than just a need for calories. And again, the folks we're serving, many of them are working. It's a broken system when people are working one or two jobs and can't afford the food at the supermarket. So wait till the end of the day when we can pick it up and then bring it to a food pantry and they can go pick it up there. It's broken.
I think the cohort that all of us deal with, I was very surprised to see how many people are immunosuppressed. So you have a group of people that we're feeding that are not as healthy as the rest of us, and therefore there really needs to be a good eye on safety of food handling. And it's nothing more important to us that if people are depending on our agencies that are feeding them, they have to understand that that food, we are so against dumpster diving. We are so against things that change the temperature of food. There are reasons why people are getting Meals on Wheels that are specifically made for their diets. So the cohort that we deal with, for part of it, not everyone, have issues that we would not think of.
Our organization, the impact of I'll just give you the story of applesauce at Children's Hospital. We partner with Boston area gleaners. They glean from all these other farms. We said, hey, look, we have a customer at Boston Children's Hospital that would love to get applesauce not only to the rooms of the hospital, but also sell it at the Chef's Playground, which is a retail site. We then said, instead of, and I could go back to Children's Hospital and say, what's the most you can pay for it? So then the gleaners can say, actually, we can pay you for these apples. So now, instead of it being a free apple that the gleaners picked up from that farm, they can now then say, hey, wow, we can actually pay you 55 cents. We'll take 35. So the value continues to grow. It's economic impact, and it's actually feeding people at the hospital who are looking for a healthy, local applesauce. So that is the impact in dealing with the surplus. It is huge.
I guess I'll finish it off. One of our Goodr's biggest recipients are senior citizens. We really focus on getting food directly to people because I believe that if you have trouble accessing food, you have trouble accessing transportation. And so I think that the model is very broken, that we're only taking food to food banks and pantries, and then we're now waiting for people to be able to get to them. And I think when you think about seniors who often don't drive or are relying on different transportation, you think of single mothers who are relying on public transportation that now have to get them and their children on a bus, and how much food can they really take back from that pantry to the house. Our goal is to take food directly to organizations, and so we've partnered with National Church Residences and Mercy Care, and we are now serving about 15 different affordable low-income housing units for senior citizens. We've created a co-op called the Goodr Girls, a spinoff of the Golden Girls, if I'm aging myself here. But we contact one of our Goodr Girls. We let them know when food is coming. They make an announcement to the senior property. We bring it into the community center, and I've never seen them move so fast. But one of the things that I think was very surprising to me is how little senior citizens are getting in SNAP benefits. When I found out that they were receiving just $16 a month, they became my very big focus of trying to get as much food as I could to seniors. Often they're always making that critical decision, do I pay for my prescriptions or do I pay for food, when a lot of their prescriptions require them to be taken with food. I think that that's a problem, and I think we speak a lot about children, but seniors are the next one. We have 7 million seniors that are hungry in this country, and they don't get free breakfast and lunch at school. So I want to make sure that we continue to understand that we have a lot of people who cannot move to get food, that are needing food, that are just in their households. And so we're really focused on expanding and getting food directly to the doors of more senior citizens.
Fantastic. Thank you all for a fabulous conversation.